With all eyes on a potential conflict between the US and Venezuela, with claims saying that it could break out any minute now, could Russia come to the rescue? They're obviously a bit tied down in Ukraine right now, but delivery of an S-400 system or the numerous anti-ship missiles that they're not using against Ukraine could complicate matters for the US. And we've already seen a few Russian cargo flights landed in the country. The real question is, can Russia even get there and deliver them in time? Shipping by sea would take weeks, plus more to plan, organize, prepare, and load. Does Russia have the capability to deliver such large and heavy equipment by air halfway around the world, especially considering most of Europe is restricting the use of their airspace? But before we get into that, our sponsor, Incogni. Your personal data is being traded like currency. Data brokers collect your name, address, phone number, even social security numbers, then sell it to marketers, scammers, and worse. Then come people search sites. They publish your life online for anyone to see. The list just goes on and on of people who would happily exploit your information. First, these sites give stalkers and fraudsters a free roadmap of your life. Second, they expose your household, sometimes including minors, putting everyone at risk. Incogni ends this. It automatically contacts data brokers, demands removal of your information, and even handles their objections. And with their yearly plan, Incogni keeps scrubbing your data whenever it reappears. Your information is exposed right now. One wrong click, one bad actor, that's all it takes. Don't wait for your own identity theft or harassment. Sign up for Incogni today and stop the leaks before they ever destroy your peace. Go to Incogni.com and use my code CABAL for an exclusive 60% off an annual plan. Again, Incogni. The US by far leads the world in long-range airlift capability. Really, no one else comes close. And that capability came out of necessity. While Russia and the Soviet Union before it were much larger countries, they expected to fight in Asia or Europe, right on their doorstep. The US, on the other hand, had to fly halfway around the world to places like Japan as well as Europe. That being said, the Soviets did invest heavily in its own capability just given the size of their country. And that's something that Russia has benefited from. They today operate the largest capacity transport aircraft in the world, the AN-124. It is absolutely massive, carrying over 120 tons and has the range to literally reach any place on Earth without landing to refuel, not counting airspace restrictions. The problem is, though, they can't do both at the same time. An extremely important fact to keep in mind is that an aircraft's range is dependent on its payload. The heavier the payload, the shorter the range. And that becomes a big problem, as at max payload, it couldn't even cross the shortest distance flight across the Atlantic Ocean. On top of that, the aircraft cannot refuel in air. So to make the trip, it cannot actually utilize its full capability. In addition to that, Russia doesn't have very many of them, roughly a dozen. The other large transport of Russia is the IL-76. This one they operate in much larger numbers, over 100. They only have half the capacity of the AN-124, but they do have the ability to refuel in flight. The problem there, though, is that Russia lacks in tanker aircraft, with only about a dozen. Making matters even worse is that Russia uses a refueling method called probe and drogue. It works great for refueling things like fighter aircraft, but it's not ideal for large strategic aircraft. Compared to the other method, boom refueling, that the US mostly uses, it's way slower to offload fuel, and it's very challenging for large aircraft to catch that loose hose pretty much just dangling out the back. Bad weather, turbulence, any number of things could make the process impossible. And when you're out over the ocean, that's not good. There are very few options to make emergency landings. So, for safety margins, they'd have to have less than full payload. All that being said, each aircraft would likely only carry about 40 to 50 tons. To get an idea of what that is, that's barely one tank, or 2 armored vehicles, or the equivalent mass of other parts and cargo. Now, the flight paths could be devised. They could play hopscotch around Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, but the big challenge is crossing the Atlantic. That flight would be over 3,000 miles, hence the limits on payload capacity. But the troubles don't end there either. Some airports Russia would have to use, especially those in West or Northwest Africa, can only support a couple large aircraft at a time. So as you can see, this whole thing would be extremely slow and a logistics nightmare. Rand had a pretty good report out there talking about how many flights and how long it would take to transport just one battalion. But in this case, a more realistic scenario is Russia sending what Venezuela is asking for. Things like missiles, radar, air defenses, etc. So, to make it easy, let's just consider a case where Russia wants to send just one S-400 battery to them. We have some decent figures from Russia selling and delivering them to other countries, like Turkey. The first battery delivered took at least 30 flights. But Turkey is right next to Russia, therefore those transports could carry larger payloads. Just one battery consists of some 25 to 30 vehicles. Typically 8 launchers, a search radar, a fire control radar, a command post, plus a dozen support vehicles. Each of those vehicles weigh between 40 and 50 tons, so each flight will be able to carry just one and pretty much nothing else. And that's not to mention the missiles, spare parts, supplies, personnel, and so on. So again, just to send one battery, it would likely take 40 plus flights, and it would take weeks to accomplish, and be a nightmare in logistics and planning. At that point, it'd almost be easier and quicker to transport by sea. So yes, Russia could do it, but it lacks the ability to do so with any speed. They lack the mass scale, rapid, strategic airlift capacity that really only the US currently has. And of course, all this is if Russia even has any extra air defenses, missiles, and spare parts to send them. Right now, they're obviously pretty tied down in Ukraine to come to the aid of Venezuela halfway around the world.